Voordat ons by klein besighede kom, skop ons vanaand se program af deur te fokus op die groot maatskappye. Die direksie en die uitvoerende hoof van die JSE gaan ook 'n deel van hul salarisse afstaan om die COVID-19 pandemie te help beveg en het reeds meer as R30 miljoen aan die solidariteitsfonds beloof. Uitvoerende hoof van die JSE, Dr. Leila Fourie, sluit nou via Skype by my aan. Dr. Fourie, welcome to WINSLYN.
Hi, Devon. Thank you.
Leila, how difficult has it been and how much damage has been done to the JSE over the last couple of weeks?
Well, Devon, we had an incredibly negative March, and in fact, we were down more than 30% on the all-share index, but that's come back a little bit, and so we're now down 13.9%, which is still a huge decline year to date, but much better than we saw in the month of March. The financial sector is particularly badly hit. They are down. The large banks have lost 47% of their market capitalization year to date. Now, I think that is a temporary thing. The banks are incredibly well capitalized and they are very sound, and the central bank has done an enormous amount to stimulate the financial markets environment. So I do believe that's a short-lived problem. We have seen some quite big outflows in foreign investment, particularly in the bond market. In fact, we saw 55 billion rand flowing out of the market for the whole of March. That's come back to about 53.9 billion now, so it's improving slightly. But I think the major issues are around the sort of herd mentality that you see, and to the extent that we see shocks in the oil price, like we've seen in the last day or so, where it's hit $11, less than $11 a barrel, which kind of makes it cheaper than water.
Sure.
It does really send gyrations through the market.
Leila, there are different views on whether or not this was the right decision to extend this lockdown. And I'm sure very few people can say, yes, it was a good idea or not. But from your point of view, do you think that the South African government has taken the right decision to extend the lockdown?
Look, I think that the South African government makes decisions based on the health and scientific and medical information they have at hand. And often the general public doesn't get to see everything that they get to see. I don't think we should underestimate the impact that the lockdown is going to have on the economy. It will be a dramatic impact, and particularly on small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as the hospitality industry. What I do think is vital for the government is that they get the number of tests that they're performing increased, and that the stimulus package that is being discussed at Cabinet at the moment, where R1 trillion South African rands is being discussed as a stimulus package, that will be essential to uplift the economy and to stimulate activity.
So I assume something else that's really important is investor confidence, and we don't know when that is going to return. But before joining the JSE, you spoke about rebuilding this reputation, especially if you think about the Steinhoff fraud debacle, to foreign investors. How are you going to manage this now, and what do you think is the appetite of international investors when they look at the South African market?
Devon, I think that the appetite on emerging markets right now is very much risk off. So investors are not looking for yield right now, they're looking for stability. That will pass, and the rest of the global economy is going to be in a slump. It's going to be in a low growth environment, and there will be a search for yield. And emerging markets, and particularly South Africa, will provide that yield. Our bonds are giving more than 9% increase in yield at the moment. So I do think that the yield that we offer is attractive. I think the idea that sub-investment or junk status is pariah status and won't be touched is a thing of the past. We've seen unprecedented moves by the Federal Reserve, where they've announced that they will be investing in junk status bonds to stimulate the markets. So I do think that we have a lot going for us, and I do think that the structural reform that the COVID crisis has created in government will also stimulate an interest and reintroduce or bring back some of the confidence that's required in the international market to inward invest in South Africa.
So let's look at the JSE itself. I'm sure you're competing against other bigger bourses at the moment, for new listings. Taking into account the current climate and the pandemic, what's the likelihood of a bourse like the JSE to be able to attract new listings?
We are doing a lot in that space to try and market the country. I think there are two dynamics at play. The first is that private equity and alternative forms of funding have dramatically increased over the last couple of years. So the contraction in IPOs that we're seeing on the JSE is not dissimilar. It's very similar and equal to what we're seeing in other traditional exchanges. I think a large part of that was driven by cheap money through quantitative easing, and interestingly, we'll see cheap money being pumped into the markets globally again. But I do think that tide will turn. And so the investment onto the exchange or listings onto the exchange is a long-term game. This is not something that is driven by short-term scenarios. And if you look at our market cap over the last year, the market cap of the JSE increased by 38%.
Sure.
Some of that was driven by corporate actions, but corporate actions bring growth. So, for example, Naspers unbundled and listed Prosus in Amsterdam, and our volumes have increased by 4% if we exclude the very high volumes that we saw during the month of September when that happened. So we do have a lot of very credible and world-class listed entities in our top 40. Our markets are deep and liquid, and we punch way above our weight in relation to the real economy.
Absolutely.
The JSE's market cap.
Leila, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for your valuable time. We do appreciate that. Ons het oor die afgelope paar weke gevra dat kykers enige vrae en onsekerhede in terme van die inperking na ons toe deurstuur. Ons neem 'n vinnige advertensiebreek en beantwoord 'n paar van hierdie vrae net hierna. Bly waar jy is.